"Cowboy, do look, my dress is gone," whispered the Apache woman behind the waterfall. Wild West. Eli Mercer rode slowly along a narrow trail, his horse stepping carefully over loose stones. He was not in a hurry, but his eyes missed nothing. Broken twigs, pressed grass, and faint marks in the dust told a story to anyone who knew how to read the land. Eli had learned that skill the hard way, growing up where mistakes could cost more than pride. Eli was a ranch hand, plain and quiet, the kind of man people often overlooked. He worked for the Caldwell Ranch, a spread that sat near the edge of rough territory where law and order did not always reach. 2 horses had gone missing the night before, good animals, trained and valuable. The ranch owner believed thieves had taken them, and Eli had volunteered to track them. He did not do it for praise or reward. He did it because the land was part of him, and he understood it better than most. The trail had led him away from the open plains and into rising ground. The air changed as he rode deeper into the canyon country. The wind cooled, carrying the smell of stone and distant water. Eli slowed his horse, listening. The desert was never truly silent. Insects hummed, birds called from unseen places, and sometimes the wind whispered like a warning. Today, that whisper felt different. The tracks were not clear anymore. Whoever passed through had moved fast, careless in places but smart enough to scatter signs when the ground hardened. Eli dismounted and studied the earth closely. He crouched, touching the dirt with 2 fingers. It was still warm. Not long ago, someone had been here. He stood and looked around. The canyon walls rose on both sides, tall and uneven, shaped by time and weather. Shadows stretched across the path, making the narrow pass feel smaller than it was. Eli felt a quiet tension settle in his chest. This was no place for trouble, yet trouble often found places like this. As he led his horse forward, he noticed something odd. The tracks were mixed now. Some were boot marks, heavy and deep. Others were lighter, uneven, as if someone had stumbled or run without strength. Eli frowned. This was no simple horse theft. The sound of water reached him next, faint but steady. He had not known there was a waterfall this far in. Curious and cautious, he followed the sound. The path grew steeper, forcing him to leave his horse tied to a scrubby tree. He continued on foot, moving slowly, each step measured. The waterfall appeared suddenly, tucked between tall rocks like a secret the land had tried to hide. Water spilled down into a small pool, clear and cold-looking against the dry surroundings. Mist rose from it, cooling Eli's face. For a moment he forgot about the tracks, the horses, and the heat. The place felt untouched, peaceful in a way that made him uneasy. He took a step closer, boots crunching softly on gravel. That was when he heard the voice. It was low and urgent, barely louder than the water itself. At first, Eli thought the sound was only his imagination carried by the fall. He froze, heart pounding. He listened again. "Don't come closer," the voice whispered. Eli stopped completely. He did not reach for his gun. He did not speak. He stood still, hands open at his sides, showing no threat. Years of living on the edge of danger had taught him one important thing. Fear often grew worse when fed by sudden moves. "I won't," he said calmly, raising his voice just enough to be heard. "I didn't know anyone was here." There was a pause. The waterfall filled the silence, rushing and steady. Eli's eyes stayed forward, careful not to scan too closely. Something told him this was not an ordinary meeting. "I need you to turn around," the voice said again. This time there was pain in it, mixed with strength. "Please." Eli turned slowly, facing the canyon wall instead of the water. He could feel the presence behind him now, though he could not see her. He sensed fear, but also pride. Whoever she was not begging for rescue. She was asking for space. "I'm looking for stolen horses," Eli said, choosing his words carefully. "I don't want trouble." A short breath came from behind the falls. "I am not a thief," the woman said. Eli believed her. He did not know why, but the way she spoke held truth. He nodded even though she could not see him. "I'll leave," he said. "Just say the word." Another pause followed. Then the woman spoke again, quieter this time. She explained that she had been running for a long time. Men had followed her, men who did not belong to her people and did not respect them. She had torn her clothing while escaping through brush and rock. The waterfall was the first place she had found where the trail vanished. Eli listened without interrupting. He did not ask questions. He understood enough to know that danger was close and not just for her. The tracks he had seen now made sense. "Are they still coming?" he asked. "Yes," she answered. "They are not far." Eli's jaw tightened. He thought of the mixed footprints, the hurried signs. He thought of the kind of men who chased someone into a canyon. His duty to the ranch faded in importance. This was no longer about missing horses. "I have a coat," he said after a moment. "I can leave it on a rock. I won't turn around." There was hesitation, then a soft sound of agreement. Eli shrugged off his coat and placed it carefully near the edge of the pool, still facing away. He stepped back, giving distance. The mist dampened his shirt, but he did not move. Behind him, the water shifted. He heard the careful sound of someone stepping forward. Still, he did not turn. Respect mattered here more than curiosity. He wondered how his day had changed so quickly. That morning his worries had been simple: follow tracks, recover horses, return before dark. Now he stood in a hidden canyon, bound by an unspoken promise to protect a stranger. The wind shifted, carrying new sounds. Faint voices echoed from somewhere above the canyon. Laughter rough and careless. The woman stiffened behind him. Eli felt it even without seeing her. "They are close," she whispered. Eli's hand curled into a fist, then relaxed. He measured the land in his mind, remembering old paths and narrow ways through stone. He knew this canyon better than those men ever would. "Stay quiet," he said softly, "and trust me." For the first time, the woman did not answer right away. When she did, her voice carried something new, not fear, but resolve. "I will." The sun dipped lower, shadows deepening across the canyon. The sound of approaching danger grew clearer. In that moment, Eli Mercer stood between two worlds, one he knew well and one he barely understood. He did not know yet that this meeting would follow him for the rest of his life, changing how he saw the land, the people, and himself. But the West had always been a place where one moment could decide a man's path forever, and this was that moment. Eli stayed where he was, his back still turned to the waterfall. The sound of rushing water filled the space between him and the woman, steady and strong like a shield made of noise. He could hear her breathing now, slow but careful, as if she was forcing herself to stay calm. The voices above the canyon grew louder, drifting down in broken pieces carried by the wind. Whoever those men were, they were not trying to hide. Eli's mind worked fast. He measured distance, sound, and time. The canyon walls rose steeply, and the path leading down to the waterfall was narrow. Anyone coming from above would have to slow down. That gave them a small advantage, but only if they used it wisely. "Stay close to the rock," Eli said quietly, still not turning around. "The mist will help hide you." She shifted slightly, the sound of wet stone under careful steps. "You know this place," she said. "I grew up near here," Eli replied. "Not this exact spot, but land like it. The land teaches you if you listen." For a moment, neither of them spoke. The voices echoed again, closer now. Eli caught words he didn't like, spoken with careless confidence. These were men who believed they could take whatever they wanted. The kind of men the West produced too often. Eli felt anger rise in his chest, but he pushed it down. Anger made mistakes easy. "Can you walk?" he asked. "Yes," she answered. "I am tired, but I can walk." "That's enough," he said. "We won't stay here long." He reached down and picked up a small stone, tossing it gently into the pool. The splash blended with the waterfall, but it was enough to test how sound carried. The men above did not react. They were still searching blindly. Eli took one careful step sideways, still facing the rock wall. He traced the canyon in his memory, remembering a narrow split he had once found while hunting deer years ago. It wasn't easy to see unless you knew where to look. From the outside, it looked like nothing more than a shadow. "There's a way out," he said. "Not the easy way, but the quiet one." The woman hesitated. "They will not follow. Not if we're careful," Eli replied. "They'll keep looking for tracks that aren't there." He bent slightly and drew a simple shape in the damp dirt with his boot, explaining the path as best he could. He described where to step, where not to touch, and how to keep low. He spoke slowly, making sure she understood. She listened closely, asking only one question. "Why are you helping me?" she asked. Eli paused. He hadn't expected that. The answer came from a place deeper than reason. "Because no one deserves to be hunted," he said simply. Another silence followed, heavier this time. Then she spoke again, her voice steadier than before. "My name is Nayland," she said. "From the Apache people." Eli nodded. "I'm Eli." Names felt important in that moment. They made things real. The voices above them shifted position. One man shouted something, frustration clear in his tone. Eli guessed they had lost the trail at the water just as Nayland had hoped. "Now," Eli whispered. He moved first, slow and sure, leading without looking back. Nayland followed, her steps light despite her exhaustion. The hidden path was little more than a crease in the rock, but once inside, the canyon swallowed them whole. The waterfall sound faded, replaced by the soft scrape of boots and breath against stone. The passage grew tighter, forcing them to move sideways at times. Eli went first, clearing small, loose rocks before Nayland reached them. He felt responsible now, not because he had chosen to be, but because the choice had chosen him. They climbed upward slowly, stopping often to listen. The voices above grew faint, then disappeared altogether. Only the wind remained, whispering through cracks in the stone. After what felt like hours, the passage opened into a narrow ledge overlooking a dry ravine. The sun was lower now, painting the rocks in deep orange and purple. Eli finally turned around. Nayland stood a few steps behind him, wrapped in his coat, her dark hair damp from the mist. Her face was marked by dust and fatigue, but her eyes were sharp and alert. She met his gaze without fear. "Thank you," she said. Eli nodded. "We're not done yet." They moved along the ledge, keeping low. Eli showed her where to place her feet, where the rock was solid and where it crumbled. She followed well, her movements careful but confident. It was clear she was used to traveling rough land. As they walked, Nayland spoke softly, telling him how she had been separated from her people during a trading journey gone wrong. She spoke of trust broken and of running without rest. Eli listened, saying little. He did not need to understand every detail to understand the pain. When night finally began to settle, Eli led them into a shallow cave hidden by brush. It was not much, but it would hide them until morning. He gathered a few dry branches and built a small fire deep inside, keeping the light low. They sat across from each other, the fire between them. The warmth eased the chill, but the weight of the day remained. "You could have walked away," Nayland said quietly. "Many would have." Eli stared into the fire. "I've walked away before," he said. "I don't aim to do it again." Outside, the desert settled into night. Stars appeared, bright and endless. Somewhere far off, a coyote called. The men who had chased Nayland were gone for now, but Eli knew danger rarely vanished completely. It only waited. As the fire burned low, Eli kept watch while Nayland rested. He did not sleep. His thoughts wandered to the ranch, to the missing horses, to the simple life he had known that morning. He understood that things would not return to how they were. The West was changing him, as it changed everyone who truly saw it. When dawn came, pale and quiet, Eli knew the hardest part was still ahead. Morning arrived slowly, as if the desert itself was tired. A thin line of light crept across the rocks and slipped into the shallow cave. Eli had not slept. He sat near the entrance, watching the land as it woke. The fire had long turned to ash, and the night air still clung to the stone. Nayland stirred and sat up, pulling the coat tighter around herself. For a moment she looked confused, then memory returned to her eyes. She glanced toward the cave opening, then at Eli. "You stayed awake," she said softly. Eli nodded. "Habit." She studied him quietly. "You protect like someone who has lost something before." Eli did not answer right away. He stood and stretched, his joints stiff. "We should move while the air is still cool," he said. "Once the sun rises higher, tracks will show easier." Nayland rose and followed him out of the cave. The desert looked different in the morning. Harsh lines softened under early light, and the air felt clean, almost hopeful. Still, danger did not disappear just because the sun came up. They moved carefully along the ravine, staying off open ground. Eli chose paths where stone replaced sand, places where footsteps faded quickly. Nayland walked beside him now, no longer trailing behind. Her strength was returning, and so was her calm. After a long stretch of silence, Nayland spoke. "There is a place not far from here," she said. "A crossing near old cottonwood trees. My people pass there sometimes." Eli considered this. "That could be good," he said, "but only if we're sure no one is watching." "They do not know the land the way you do," she replied. A small smile touched Eli's face. "Neither do they know it the way you do." They continued on, sharing the lead without speaking about it. Trust had grown quietly between them, not through promises but through action. When Eli paused to listen, Nayland did the same. When she sensed movement in the distance, Eli trusted her warning. By midday, the heat pressed down hard. They rested in the shade of a rock overhang, sharing water sparingly. Eli noticed how carefully Nayland conserved her strength. She was tired but not weak. Her eyes stayed alert, always scanning. "You could leave me," she said suddenly, "after the crossing." Eli looked at her, surprised. "I could," he agreed. "But you won't," she said, not as a question. Eli thought about it. He thought about the ranch, about how easily he could return and say he lost the trail. He also thought about the men in the canyon and the look in Nayland's eyes when she spoke of being hunted. "No," he said quietly, "I won't." They moved again, slower now. As afternoon stretched on, they heard something that made them both stop at once. Hoofbeats, distant but clear. Eli dropped to one knee, pressing his hand to the ground. The sound traveled through stone, more than one horse. He cursed under his breath, not loud enough to carry. "They didn't give up," he said. Nayland's jaw tightened. "They rarely do." Eli scanned the land. To the west, low hills; to the east, broken rock and narrow draws. He chose the latter without hesitation. "This way," he said. They descended into a dry wash, following its twisting path. Eli knew washes well. They could hide sound and tracks, but only if used right. He walked along the harder edges, stepping where water once ran strongest. The hoofbeats grew louder, then faded, then returned. The men were searching wide now, guessing instead of tracking. Still, guessing could be enough. As they moved, Nayland spoke more of her past. She told him of her family, of stories passed by firelight, of songs tied to the land. Eli listened, surprised by how much those stories felt familiar. Different words, same roots. The wash narrowed suddenly, forcing them to climb out. Eli helped Nayland up, steadying her without rushing. From the ridge above, they could see far across the land. And there they were. 3 riders moving slowly, scanning the ground. Eli's chest tightened. He counted distance, wind, cover. They were not close enough yet, but that could change fast. Nayland saw them too. Her breathing quickened, but she did not panic. "There," she said, pointing to a line of trees near the horizon. "The crossing." Eli followed her gaze. It was far, but possible. "We'll have to split the trail," he said. "Confuse them." He removed his hat and dragged it lightly across the sand in the opposite direction, then wiped away their true path with a branch. Nayland watched closely, learning. When they moved again, they separated briefly, then rejoined beyond a cluster of rocks. The riders reached the wash soon after. Eli and Nayland hid among stones, barely breathing. They watched as the men argued, pointing in different directions. One dismounted, studying the ground. Eli held still, every muscle tight. After long moments, the men chose the wrong path. They waited until the sound of hoofbeats faded completely. Nayland closed her eyes in relief. Eli let out a slow breath. "That was close," he said. "Yes," she replied, "too close." They reached the cottonwood crossing as the sun began to lower again. The trees stood tall and quiet, leaves whispering in the breeze. The place felt safer, though Eli knew no place was truly safe. Nayland knelt and touched the ground, pressing her palm to the earth. She closed her eyes briefly, then stood. "My people will find signs here," she said. "I can wait," Eli nodded. "I'll stay until you're sure." They built a small shelter of branches and rested. As evening came, Nayland spoke again. "When this is over," she said, "you will go back to your life." Eli stared at the sky. "Maybe," he said, "but it won't be the same one." Nayland looked at him then, really looked at him. "The land changes us," she said. "That is its truth." As night fell once more, Eli understood that the turning point had already passed. He had crossed it quietly without knowing the cost. And even if the danger was not yet finished, neither was his path. Night settled gently over the cottonwood crossing, but the calm felt thin, like a blanket that could be pulled away at any moment. The stars came out one by one, bright and sharp against the dark sky. Eli sat near the edge of the trees, watching the land beyond. Nayland rested a short distance away, her back against a trunk, eyes half closed but alert. Neither of them truly slept. The land carried sound far at night. A small noise could travel for miles, and Eli knew that men who searched in daylight often returned after dark, hoping fear would make their work easier. He listened for hoofbeats, for voices, for anything out of place. The wind moved through the leaves, soft and steady, but it did not hide everything. After some time, Nayland rose and walked to him. "You are worried," she said quietly. Eli did not deny it. "They lost the trail," he said. "Men like that don't accept losing." She nodded. "Then we must be ready." They spoke in low voices, planning what little they could. If her people did not arrive by morning, they would move again. Eli would guide her farther east, closer to land he knew well. It was not the plan he had imagined when the day began, but plans had stopped meaning much. As the night grew colder, Eli built a small fire, hidden deep among the trees. The light barely reached beyond the trunks. He fed it slowly, careful not to let it grow. They shared the last of the water, measuring each sip. "You could still leave," Nayland said, "before this becomes heavier." Eli looked at the fire, then at her. "It already has," he said. Just before dawn, Eli heard it, a faint sound almost lost in the quiet. He raised his hand, signaling Nayland to stay still. He listened again. This time there was no doubt. Horses, slow, cautious. "They found the crossing," he whispered. Nayland's face hardened. "Then we must go now." They moved quickly but carefully, stepping away from the trees and into broken ground where tracks would scatter. The sky lightened in the east, and with it came urgency. Darkness had been their cover. Light would take it away. They had not gone far when voices carried behind them. The riders were closer than Eli had hoped. He led Nayland into a narrow stretch of rocks, where the land dropped suddenly into a maze of stone. This was dangerous ground, but it was the only chance they had. They climbed and descended, scraping hands and boots, breathing hard. Eli stayed just ahead, helping when needed but never pulling. He knew pride mattered to Nayland as much as survival. At one point, loose stone shifted under her foot. Eli turned just in time to steady her. They froze, listening. The voices paused, then moved again, missing the sound by a narrow margin. They reached a high ridge as the sun broke free of the horizon. From there they could see the riders clearly now. 4 men, spread wide, confident again. Eli's jaw tightened. He knew this land, but numbers mattered. "We can't keep running," he said. "Not like this." Nayland looked out over the land. "There is a place," she said slowly. "A narrow pass between the hills, only one way through." Eli followed her gaze. He knew it too, a risky choice. If the riders reached it first, there would be no escape. "We'll have to move fast," he said. They ran. The pass rose steeply, forcing them to slow. Eli felt his legs burn, his breath shorten. He pushed through it, ignoring the pain. Behind them, the riders shouted. They had seen them now. Eli reached the pass first and turned, standing firm. He knew he could not fight them all, but sometimes standing your ground changed things. Nayland stayed just behind him, silent and steady. The riders approached cautiously this time. They saw the look in Eli's eyes. This was not a man begging or hiding. "You've made this harder than it had to be," one of them called out. Eli said nothing. Words would not help here. For a long moment no one moved. The wind blew dust across the pass. Then from the far side of the hills a sound rose that froze everyone in place. Voices, many voices. Eli recognized the tone before the words reached him. Nayland did too. She stepped forward, lifting her chin. Her people were coming. The riders hesitated. They looked from Eli to Nayland to the approaching figures. The balance had shifted. What had seemed like a hunt now looked like a mistake. One by one, the riders backed away. Pride kept them from running, but fear guided their retreat. Soon they were gone, swallowed by the land they had thought they controlled. Nayland exhaled slowly, as if releasing a weight she had carried for days. Her people arrived soon after. Men and women, faces marked by worry and relief. Nayland spoke with them quietly, her voice steady. They listened, eyes moving often to Eli. An older man stepped forward and nodded once at Eli. No words were needed. The danger had passed, but the cost remained. Eli stood apart, suddenly unsure of his place. He had crossed a line that could not be uncrossed. He knew the ranch, the law, and even the land might see him differently now. Nayland approached him before leaving. "You stood when it mattered," she said. "That is not forgotten." Eli nodded. "Take care of yourself." She placed his coat back into his hands. "The land will remember you," she said. As they parted, Eli watched her walk away with her people, strong and free. The sun climbed higher, warming the stone beneath his feet. He knew the road ahead would not be easy, but he also knew something important. Some choices, once made, shape a person forever, and he would carry this one with him for the rest of his days. Eli stood alone after they left, the quiet of the land settling around him once more. The sound of footsteps faded, and soon there was nothing but wind moving through grass and the distant cry of a bird. The pass that had felt so tight and dangerous moments earlier now looked wide and harmless. That was the way of the land. It never held on to fear for long. He took a deep breath and slowly made his way down from the ridge. His body felt tired in a way that went deeper than muscle. It was the kind of tired that came from days of watchfulness and choices that could not be undone. Still, his steps were steady. He knew where he was going, even if he did not yet know what waited for him there. The walk back toward the ranch took most of the day. Eli moved carefully, staying alert out of habit, though he knew the danger had passed. As the sun moved across the sky, his thoughts returned again and again to the last few days. He remembered the sound of Nayland's voice behind the waterfall, the fear held tightly in control, the trust built without promise. He realized that some meetings stayed with a person forever, not because they were loud or dramatic, but because they revealed something true. By the time he reached the open plains near the ranch, evening was falling. The familiar sight of fences and grazing land should have brought comfort, but instead it felt distant, as if he were seeing it for the first time. When he rode into the yard, a few hands looked up from their work. "Find the horses," one of them asked. Eli shook his head. "Trail went cold," he said. It was the truth, though not the whole of it. No one questioned him. In the West, a man's word still carried weight, especially when it was spoken without decoration. That night, Eli sat outside his small cabin, watching the stars. The sky looked just as it always had, wide and endless. Yet something inside him had shifted. He understood now that the land was not just something to be owned or worked. It was something to be respected, something that held stories deeper than fences and borders. Days passed. Life at the ranch returned to its steady rhythm. Horses were found, work continued, and talk moved on to other matters. Still, some people noticed the change in Eli. He spoke less, listened more. When disputes arose, he stepped in calmly, guiding rather than forcing. He had learned what power looked like when it was quiet. Sometimes, at dusk, he rode out alone toward the canyon country. He never went back to the waterfall, but he felt its presence in the sound of distant water and the cool air that came with evening. He wondered how Nayland was, whether she had returned fully to her people, whether she walked freely under the same sky. He did not regret his choice. Not once. Years went by and the West changed as it always did. New roads cut through old land. Towns grew where silence once ruled. Eli grew older, his hair touched with gray, his movements slower but sure. He eventually left the ranch, choosing a quieter life closer to the hills. Sometimes, travelers passed through and spoke of the past, of hard times and harder choices. Eli listened without interrupting. When asked about his own stories, he smiled and said little. Some truths did not need repeating to stay alive. One evening, long after the sun had set, Eli sat near a small fire outside his home. The wind carried the smell of earth and stone. He thought of the moment behind the waterfall, the moment he chose not to look, but to stand. That choice had taught him more than any trail or lesson ever had. He understood then that the Wild West was not only about survival or strength. It was about knowing when to hold power back, when to protect rather than take, and when to let the land and its people remain whole. As the fire burned low, Eli felt at peace. The land had taken much from him over the years, but it had given him something greater in return. A sense of who he was and who he chose to be, and that he knew was enough.